a sound bath isn't always like a spa, like relaxing experience. It might be showing you some things that you might have been avoiding looking at for a long time.
Right.
And it might be an opportunity to bring that to the surface and release it. I remember being in like a job where that I was just working for the money, and it was just like not fulfilling. I had to suppress my true essence every day just to fit in
Yeah.
to that workplace culture. And I didn't have control over my calendar. And it was driving me crazy because I'm like, this doesn't feel like a free life.
The benefits extend beyond you feeling better, because when you start vibrating in these higher elevated frequencies, then when you go out into the physical world and you meet people, you will attract, as if by magnetism, people who vibrate at the same frequency. And suddenly, Mike, you are here to introduce me to the world of sound healing at the most fundamental level. What is sound healing and how does it work? I'm ready to have my mind blown, please.
Sure. Yeah. So in a sound healing session, whether that's working one-on-one with a practitioner or if you are one of many in a group setting, sound can work on one person or multiple people at the same time. And it's really fascinating when you dive down the rabbit hole of how all this works and what's happening with the instruments being used, particularly instruments like gongs, crystal singing bowls, ocean drums, and that sort of thing. What's going on is that it's emanating the full spectrum of sound. So the human hearing range is typically about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. And so that's the perception that we can receive from sound. That's the bandwidth of sound that the typical human can comprehend, right? And so when all of that stimuli and frequency and vibration and overtones and everything is coming in all at the same time, the mind is trying to grasp onto what it's hearing, right? So the part of your mind that's hearing this conversation right now and interpreting my language, it's part of the prefrontal cortex, the analytical executive functioning part of the brain. It can't grasp onto all of the stimuli, all the frequencies that are coming in all at once, right?
Yeah.
And so typically what happens is the mind gets so confused it can't grasp on, and the encumbrances of the thinking analytical mind are removed. And then what happens is the brain waves slow down, right? So that's a key part. Is in our waking normal consciousness, we are in what's called the beta brainwave, right? And so when the brainwaves start to slow down, you drop into the alpha and theta and delta brainwaves. So you're oscillating somewhere between that flow state, meditation, and sleeping, right? And when that happens, the body's nervous system goes from the sympathetic nervous system over to the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. And so you're in this deep rest state, and your aperture of consciousness starts to change. And you go into what's called homeostasis. So the body goes through its own self-healing processes. And so when people come out of these experiences with a sound healing session or sound bath, you come out of it feeling restored, renewed, centered, peaceful, aligned. And ideally, yeah, you just have a sense of inner peace and restoration. And maybe you might feel energized. I get a lot of different feedback from my events that I do from, whole spectrum of different people. I've been doing sound healing for the last better part of a decade now.
Cool.
And I've worked with thousands of people now at these different kinds of events that I host. And I hear, I always say if I have 30 people in the room with me at the same time, there's going to be 30 entirely different experiences happening at once. It all depends on what the individual is coming in the space with, right? So someone might say the gongs really like irked me and they made me feel like they stirred a lot of emotions up, right? And then another person in the same event might say, well, that was, incredible. I actually fell asleep. I don't even remember what happened, right? Other people might have visual experiences where they see like, dream-like visuals, and other people might get like agitated and want to just like get up and leave because it's like triggering something that's stuck in their nervous system, perhaps, right? And, times of pause and rest in our, busy world are becoming more and more rare. So, whenever someone has, let's say, an uncomfortable emotion come up, we can just distract immediately with, our phones or eating sweets or whatever. Like there's ways to that we can distract ourselves. But when you have this moment of time, and let's say it's an hour, 90 minutes with no distractions, and you're just tuning inward and having this experience, it can bring up a lot of stuff that's like swept under the rug. So a sound bath isn't always like this spa like relaxing experience. It might be showing you some things that you might have been avoiding looking at for a long time,
Right.
and it might be an opportunity to bring that to the surface and release it, right? And I was actually just talking to a somatic therapy teacher last week, and what they were saying is that actually for the body to really let go into deep relaxation, sometimes what it's met with first is high anxiety and like sort of tumultuous emotions that might be stored down there, and it comes to the surface, and then eventually it'll let go and release, and you'll be able to fall into that deep state of that parasympathetic side of the nervous system.
That sounds so cool, man. It kind of reminds me the effects of psychedelics and how they in a way work on the same way, how they show you what you need to psychologically. So you don't choose what to experience, and so in a way you're facing the things, as you said, that you have swept under the rug, and perhaps that's what you need to face for you to heal the things you've been avoiding. And sounds like such a good opportunity to do that in a relaxed environment with this kind of music and the frequencies that put you, perhaps in a better state for you to face those things. So it does sound very, very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, that's why it's healing, right? It's like sometimes we have to come up against some things that are uncomfortable and be held in a different way than we were before, and have a different experience
Hmm.
than, let's say you had a trauma in the past or some sort of difficult adversarial circumstance that came your way, and you didn't know how to handle it before, right?
Yeah.
But if you can come up against those emotions again, but then be held in a safe container, um, then that's how you heal it. You have to kind of feel it to heal it, so to speak. So,
Right. Yeah. Right.
you have to re-feel those emotions instead of just sweeping them out under the rug. Because what happens when you suppress those emotions is that it comes out sideways, and people. That's why how people get into addiction cycles and that sort of thing. And people who have trauma um, get turn into alcoholics and start turning to drugs, or even if it's not drugs, it might be some other form of escape. They might have an issue with binge eating or that sort of thing, right? So it's because a lot of the time we're not confronting the initial trauma that happened, right?
Hmm.
And that's what's great about something like psychedelics, is because they stimulate that trauma center in the brain and brings that stuff to the forefront. And then you have that big purge or release or big cry, or nervous system is like creating these involuntary movements or things like this. It's just like of the body's form way of releasing and offloading, right?
Hmm.
And so things like sound healing is a great sort of gateway into the healing space, into the healing arts, into the, it's a great entry point to discover the path towards healing and wellness.
I certainly I'm looking forward trying it at some point for sure.
Yeah.
It's just maybe finding the right guide. Okay, let's say that I do want to try it, which I do. How would I choose who is the right, let's say, healer?
Mm.
Is it something to look for in these people? Is it something to avoid for? Because I'm sure there is so many people out there who are like fake gurus and who have somehow gained some knowledge, and now they're trying, maybe they're practicing it, but what should I look for me to get the best experience out of a healing session with a very good healer?
Yeah, I would start to look around and see who's doing the most activity in your area, right? Like
Hmm.
a facilitator that is active. I think that the way to get really good at this is to do it repetitiously and consistently. And it's the people like who are really sticking with it and are very active with it, I think, are the ones that you'll have the most high likelihood that you'll have a positive experience, right? I don't think you need to be any kind of guru or some sort of ascended master to be really good at sound healing. It's an experience that is, applied through the modality of playing these instruments. It's not about being the Dalai Lama or something like this. It's just how effective can they create a soundscape with these
Right.
instruments? How can they transition from one instrument to another? But they might have some interesting things to talk about and like intention setting for the sound experience, right? And a way to drop people into that experience, into deep relaxation using, guided meditation, and then, how to bring people out at the end. But it's ultimately about the environment in which the sound bath is taking place. Like, is the environment conducive to a deep experience like this? Or is there going to be things like outside noises taking place from street traffic or, a neighbor, stomping around on the upstairs floor, anything that might pull you out of the experience? But yeah, I would just kind of do a little bit of due diligence about who the practitioner is and what their background is and how long they've been, doing this craft for, and if they're doing a lot of activity in your area. And it might take you, one or two tries at like maybe someone's really good at it, but it's not really your flavor, your style, right? I approach my sound healing from a very scientific perspective, right?
Hmm.
And other sound healing facilitators are much more like ethereal and metaphysical about things. And they might bring in
All
themes
right.
like full moon or like astrological events that are happening, like Mercury retrograde and things like that. Like things, I don't know, like they might bring in shamanic elements or,
Right.
things that are a little bit, not so mainstream in our culture. Not to say that that's better or worse. It's just what are you into? They might also incorporate other modalities like breath work, or they might have someone doing Reiki. They might include like a microdosing experience with the sound bath. I've seen that before.
Interesting.
So yeah, just do a little bit of due diligence and see kind of who resonates with you the most in your area, and then go and check it out.
Nice, nice. And I've saw in the sound healing sessions you have different instruments. Is there a particular instrument that is more effective, or really depends from person to person what they resonate most with, like which sound they resonate most with?
Hmm. Yeah, like it's definitely depends on person to person. I would say,
Okay.
the gongs are the most effective, proven to be effective. Didgeridoo is really effective as well, I find.
Which one is that? Is that going around? No.
Didgeridoo is an Aboriginal Australian instrument that comes from that region of the world. And they've been using that for thousands of years. And it's another full spectrum instrument. It sounds incredible. And especially when someone can play the didgeridoo over you while you're lying down, you can feel the vibrations penetrating through your whole being. It's quite an incredible experience. A good set of crystal singing bowls and Tibetan singing bowls are also very effective. But again, it depends. Like some people might love the gongs and other people might find it a little bit jarring, or it might stir up, uncomfortable emotions in people. It just depends on the individual. But um, to, capture the most spectrum of people in a positive way, I think that's why I spend the most time in my sessions on the gongs, because I've found that those almost every time I'm done 20 to 30 minutes of playing the gongs, by the end of it, there's at least one person who's like completely asleep, and sometimes snoring is a factor that people fall asleep and start snoring almost every time I do this because again, it drops people into the slower brainwave of delta. So even if someone's not even that tired or sleepy, they might fall asleep because the brainwaves have been entrained and slowed down through the full spectrum of these gongs.
Nice, good to know. Good to know. Has there been what is the craziest case study that you can remember of someone who has claimed that they healed something through sound healing? Because I'm sure we can always backtrace it to sound healing because that person at the same time might have done very mindful meditation, eating better, and maybe they took a more holistic, participation in the healing. But if is there something that you can in a way read, like direct or connect, like someone said, well, healing saved me from this or heal me this way? Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I can explain with science, but I do
It
know
doesn't
that
have to.
when you go into different brainwave states, interesting things can happen when the aperture of consciousness is expanded. Right. So I've had more than on one occasion, someone come to me afterwards and tell me that they were in communication with a loved one that had passed away.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know how to explain that one, but that's been, that's happened more than once afterwards. And maybe that's real. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe they just really missed their loved one and they are hoping
Mm,
to have some communication or maybe it's a real communication. I don't know. I've also, had people, sometimes I see people having these like involuntary movements in the session where they're just, you know, they're they're in a loop of like movement with their nervous system releasing and offloading. So yeah, there's the very interesting things that can happen. And I think it's just ultimately a place where people can pause, tune inward, and feel what needs to be felt, right? I think that people just need that more than ever, really, to just slow down, tune inward, and tend to their inner garden because, what's happening in our inner reality is reflected externally, right? So it gives us a place for pause. And I always say the roots become the fruits. So when they tend to their inner garden, uh, the roots become the fruits. So the inner world can equal the outer world. And it gives people also space between stimulus and response, right? So
mhm.
that space, it can be widened when someone regularly attends, let's say, a sound bath or a yoga class, or they meditate on a regular basis, just taking or carving out some time on a daily basis, if possible, to really tune inward and create that space so that you're less reactive as you go through your days and more creative as you go through your daily life.
That's so interesting. And to think all these alternative health practices, such as, meditation, and it could be sound healing, and it could be psychedelics, how all this invoke in us a spiritual element, which traditional medication doesn't seem to have a connection. And it's fascinating because it makes you think how there is so much more than our perceived reality when we are, let's say, in this state we are now. But people are so quick to disregard it because they grew up being told how these things don't exist and they're made up and it's just people convincing themselves and telling stories. But you've experienced this firsthand, and so many people actually. And it's just so fascinating how we are so quick to disregard things we have no idea. We don't really know what we are. We have a hypothesis of what life is and how it came about, but we really have no idea. So yeah, this just reminds me how fascinating all this thing is.
Yeah, I think it's important to not get arrogant that you think you know everything,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't know anything, if you think about it. And I don't think things should be dismissed just because someone hasn't experienced something yet, right?
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, go and try it out. And then you can make your decision after you actually try to experience it rather than just kind of automatically denying that something it may be real or not real. based on your conditioning, let's say.
I'm curious, what would you say about your practice being considered a pseudoscience by mainstream health science? If someone is, not, if someone cannot make up their mind, like, do I trust this guy? Do I trust this sort of healing? What would you say to them? How can we prove them wrong?
Well, there's a lot of science behind sound and vibration
All right.
and frequency. It's very measurable. It's a very measurable by, Western scientific standards, right? What I'm
Mhm.
talking about is the not so measurable things, like, when different things happen, like I just described, consciousness wise. But
Yeah.
sound and frequency is very, very measurable in a scientific way,
Okay.
right?
All
Like
right.
sound can move physical matter, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
sound.
Yeah.
You can't see sound, but you can see that it moves, like that classic old, vision of an opera singer singing and then it just shatters a window,
Yes.
or
Yes. Yes.
right? Like that's real, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because frequency can, there's proof that frequency can shrink cancer cells now. They've proven that, right? So certain frequencies and certain hertz
Crazy.
can destroy cancer cells in the body. So sound and frequency might turn out to be something like the cure for cancer in the future, right?
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. Okay, just playing devil's advocate here. What would you say to someone making the case that people who go through your healing practice, they just experience a placebo effect that happens to people who are desperate for healing because they haven't found it elsewhere and they've been trying for years, to heal this part of them, and perhaps the SSRIs or whatever they tried therapy didn't help. And these people, maybe they're just entering a self-fulfilling prophecy path, and eventually they're just healing themselves because of that.
Well, I certainly think it could be a combination of both things,
All
right?
right.
Like I said, if I have 30 people in the room, I might have 30 different experiences, 30 different reputations. And I usually get everyone to set an intention for themselves before the sound bath begins, because there is a very powerful truth to that. The thoughts that we have, the mind can actually heal the physical body through our thoughts. That's proven. Just, think about people like Joe Dispenza, who this is like their life's work, right?
Yeah.
And so that's very, very real. So I mean, if it is a placebo effect and it does work and the person feels great afterwards, I mean, that's
Same outcome.
that's a great outcome.
That's a great outcome.
But there's also measurable science going on in the space too, right? So yeah, I think it's a combination of both things happening simultaneously.
I see. Do you personally have any favorite frequency or vibration that puts you in a very, preferred state, either be it, very relaxed or psychedelic, or do you have something that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what my intention is. If it's the middle of the day and I want to, um and I'm having a bit of an energy slump and I want to be productive,
Okay.
I would put on, I would have a delta nap, and I would go on Spotify and find a good binaural beats frequency with delta brainwaves. So the delta frequency, which entrains the brain waves, um, and slows them down, and it puts you into what's called non-sleep deep rest. So you put this in
Mhm.
your headphones for, let's say, 30 to up to 90 minutes, and you'll descend into that that delta nap in the middle of the day, and then you'll come back feeling recharged and refreshed and more focused. So
Awesome.
that's something that people can access anytime if they want to come back for the second part of their day and have a little nap and come back focused and recharged. And I really love the gongs, like especially untuned gongs, because they emanate that full spectrum of sound and frequency and vibration at the same time. So gongs are very effective in that way. But I love if I was just to like want to feel peaceful and and relaxed and sort of unwind. I love listening to like the native flute, like native flute music. I really resonate with. I just love the way it sounds. It immediately puts me into um, a nice relaxed state. Or classical guitar. I love that sound. So there's different sounds and frequencies for different intentions, right?
Nice, nice, awesome. And how would you say that, how would modern sound healing differ from the more ancient shamanic practices of sound healing? Is there any difference there, or are pretty much the same?
Well, it depends on who the practitioner is and what they do, but I would say there's not a whole lot of difference in a lot of modern, quote unquote, modern sound healing is just bringing back old ancient practices that may have been forgotten for a long time. But like the shamans, it was very interesting because thousands of years ago, somehow they knew that using a rattle or a drum at about 180 to 220 beats per minute um, would induce uh, that altered state of shamanic journeying. Let's call it the theta brainwave, where shamans in the Amazon or in Mongolia or ancient Ireland, they knew that this frequency of the rattle or the shakers or the drums at this certain speed would induce the altered state of consciousness, right?
Mm,
So that's fascinating, and yeah, so it's just like there. I don't know if there is a term called modern sound healing.
I see. Yeah,
I mean, unless we're talking about recorded um, binaural frequencies and that sort of thing.
I
But
see. Okay.
yeah, I'd say that the practices today are a lot of the time the same practices that were used in antiquity.
That would make sense. I'm thinking if sound healing has such a healing properties, then it would make sense that the opposite would be true. So, for example, sound pollution in big metropolitan cities may, like I live in London, maybe that sound pollution messes up with your subjective well-being, which then manifests in such as stress, anxiety, feeling grumpy and just stiff all day. Do you think there's any truth in that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that the environmental noise around you or around anyone can definitely have an impact on your emotional state. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Right? Think about well, I'll give you an example. Like it was the other night, it was like International Women's Day or something like this.
Yeah.
And it was like 2 weeks ago. And we went into our friend was actually doing a musical performance. And we went from a very quiet house, a very tranquil setting, and we were like, yeah, let's go watch our friend perform at this bar. And so we went from this quiet home and we went into this bar and it was like loud music, lots of people drinking alcohol. And immediately we were like, oh, like this is too much loud stimuli. And we didn't feel good, right? Like it was just, maybe the people who had a lot of beer that night felt good. But for us to just show up in that environment all of a sudden, it was like too overwhelming. But there's definitely something to like environmental noise and sound that um, can have an impact on one's emotions. So think about when you're out in nature and you hear like bird song or you hear like the wind blowing through the trees. It's like really nice, or a nice sound of a creek, right? It's like, you feel you're in a certain state. But when you are, standing beside a freeway, um, it's not like the greatest feeling, right? You're like, "Ew, this is like too loud
Hmm.
or too jarring." Um, yeah, and then there's like this rabbit hole that I've gone down in before, where the difference between 440 hertz and 432 hertz is an interesting kind of conspiracy theory, um, where there is, I don't know if it's true or not, but if you go on YouTube and you watch this documentary called Sonic Geometry, just type in sonic geometry on YouTube. It's very interesting. And it explains kind of the universe through the perspective of sound and frequency and how everything pieces together. It's only about 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It's very short, but it's very interesting. And discusses, the significance of 432 hertz. And that's sort of like the natural frequency of the universe and our beings and nature, right? Um, and somewhere along the lines, they think maybe it was like during the Nazi era in Germany, they changed the international concert tuning standard to 440 hertz, right? And so all the music we hear today, like on the radio and in all musical instruments now, the standard tuning is 440 hertz, which could be a little bit dissonant to the human biology,
Hmm.
right? So maybe some sort of like um, malevolent actors wanted to do that on purpose just so that we would be a little bit dissonant in our beings in society, and it would cause
Yeah.
disruption to our, you know, overall well-being. But that, I don't know if that's entirely true. That's just a theory. It's kind of going down a conspiracy rabbit
Well, it
hole.
is possible because they already have weaponized sound. There was
Mhm.
this protest in Serbia a couple of days ago, which was the biggest one ever. So, yeah, so basically, you see people filming the crowd in the
Mhm.
protest, and it's just quiet. It's just people waiting in the protest. And suddenly, thousands of people just flee and open because they've been attacked with this frequency, and everyone starts screaming and covering their ears.
Yeah.
So they used this technology back in some years ago in Brazil. So it's like a counter, like for hooligans making big protests. So if
So
they
that
can
right
do,
there should, um, persuade any of these skeptics of the power of sound,
Mhm.
right? That the government is using sound to dissipate rioters and protests, right? That's the
Yeah,
power of sound. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not having an effect, right?
right.
So the fact that the government is using this it's like weaponizing sound and frequency. I don't think that's a great thing, but
No.
it shows you that there is measurable science behind it, right?
And you don't even need to weaponize it. You live in a city, so every single frequency and sound that let's say you were born in a city, so you've been constantly among the noises of the electronics and the sound is the tires making the asphalt, and all these frequencies that are very unnatural to the human body, because we are made to be listening, as you said, to the crickets and to the birds. So let's now then add up 50 years of your life living in a city with the occasional escape somewhere in a beach, but that adds up. And then you are perhaps more emotionally gullible when it comes to, it could be anything, like maybe you're more suggestible to whatever propaganda, they're more
Mhm.
suggestible when they introduce some new measures, because your whole life you've been in this turmoil, in the synchronicity which you're not meant to be. And I'm not saying it's been weaponized, it's just a side effect of living in this unnatural environment we have created away from nature. So, yeah, that could be also a thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's all kinds of possibilities. And yeah, yeah, it's a very interesting concept to think about, to contemplate for sure.
Is sound healing something you can self administer, or is a practice best received by someone whilst you
Yeah, I
relax
would say,
and
you can use things like the gongs to actively play in the Tibetan singing bowls and things like that. And you can receive some benefits from it. Whenever I'm doing a sound bath, I'm definitely receiving something because after I'm done doing a session for a group,
Mhm.
I also am feeling like much more calm, peaceful,
Right.
relaxed, um, a little bit sort of like floaty, right? But I would say if someone wants to like sort of self administer sound healing on themselves, I would say the voice is actually the most potent sound healing tool that we all have,
Interesting.
right? So using the voice in certain ways, like humming, chanting, resonating your entire being using your voice is very, very powerful. So usually I'll play what's called the harmonium. It's this Indian instrument, and it's like a wind instrument with the piano keys that you squeeze the wind through, and it makes a beautiful sound. But then I'll chant a vocal overtone over the harmonium. And always after I've done, 10 minutes of that, I feel like, whew, I feel like completely like renewed after that. So the voice is very powerful, but I would say if it's any kind of physical instrument, it's probably better that someone else is playing those instruments or working with those tools while you are on the receiving end, lying down, let's say, in a very comfortable position.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll
Because
make.
when you're playing it, you're kind of still in your executive thinking analytical
Yeah.
mind, right? You're alert, you're in that beta brainwave still in some level. But when you're lying down, like in a shavasana position, meaning like just lying on your back in a corpse pose, there's something that is more conducive to achieving those altered states when you're in sort of a lying down position.
Right. Right. Okay. I don't know if this is a stupid question, but can sound healing work on people with acoustic impairments? Because I would assume that there might be some way they can pick up the vibrations and frequencies through the body, even though the hearing is impaired. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, actually, one of my students that have come through my academy is working on that right now out of Australia, where he has these sort of like vibro acoustic beds that he's creating, where you can feel the vibration
That's cool.
all over the physical body where people are lying down. So even if you are hard of hearing or even deaf, then you can still have the benefits of vibrational healing for sure.
Crazy.
Yeah, and I actually just did an event for the company Range Rover. So
Okay,
I was
nice.
at this Range Rover house where they're promoting their newest models, and they hired me to do sound baths for their VIP clients and guests for the 7 days of that event. And it's very cool that the newest Range Rover models, like the luxury models, or the sort of like the deluxe models, I guess you could say, of Range Rover Sport and those sort of models, they are actually incorporating this technology into their seats. And so you can put it on like sound healing mode,
No
and
way.
you can feel that sensation of the whole body vibrating, and you get this sort of like sound healing experience through this technology that's built into the seats.
One
It's
more
incredible.
benefit of being a rich person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hopefully one day they have those in all cars, but I just thought that was fascinating to see that sound healing is making its way into the mainstream now, and that's great to see.
Awesome. Personally, have you made any connections between frequencies, vibration, and the universe? It doesn't have to be scientific. Do you believe there is something grander at play? Do you believe maybe everything is a frequency? What are your thoughts on the universe and as it relates maybe to sound? Or maybe you can just take it away from sound, like if you have something interesting on this.
Yeah, I think that we're gonna start seeing more and more incredible scientific data and research come out about the power of sound, and I think that like the inner world of a human being is projected into the outer world. So whatever kind of frequency you're vibrating at, and I think emotions are certain forms of frequency. I think that emotions have a frequency, a measurable frequency.
Hmm.
So if you are someone who has anxiety or lives in fear or is angry a lot or is living in that's sort of like low hertz frequency emotions, right? And so you're going to, I don't know if I believe in like everything that like, I'm not talking about like The Secret here, but
Hmm.
I do believe there's a correlation between your emotional state and what it's like a sort of a like a frequency antenna, like whatever emotions that you are creating through your mind and your body, it will reflect back from my experience, my lived experience, whatever state that you're in. So I noticed that, if I am putting things in my body like junk food or alcohol or anything like that, that's sort of like low vibration foods or um, beverage or anything that's like not good for your gut health or your brain, right? Any kind of hard drugs or anything like that. I've noticed that when I used to be in sort of that sort of activity, it manifested in my outer reality, right? Like
Right.
the people that entered my reality, the circumstances, the things that happened were matching that frequency, right? So
Yeah.
it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? But if you fill your mind and your body with more high frequency things like listening to a positive podcast or more like lighter music, and you're eating like whole foods and like healthy dieting, and you're doing physical activities like yoga or exercising on a regular basis where you're like constantly cleaning your toroidal field, your bubble, your frequency, right?
Right.
Then you're going to keep creating a reality that aligns with that frequency. So I don't know what the universe is. I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about like beyond Earth or anything like that. So when you say the universe, I don't have a big explanation about like what all this is about, but I do know from my lived experience that my inner universe reflects my outer reality, and I think there's definitely something to that for sure.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah, and the benefits extend beyond you feeling better, because when you start vibrating in these higher elevated frequencies, then when you go out into the physical world and you meet people, you will attract, as if by magnetism, people who vibrate at the same frequency. And suddenly it's like all this, I can't make friends, or I don't seem to find any good people, or my dating life is terrible. Maybe it's because you are vibrating in a frequency that only attracts these people. That's what charisma is in a way, right? When someone walks into a room and they say, "Oh, you own the room," or it's like, no, maybe the inner world is, maybe the whole body and energy is vibrating to a frequency that suddenly everyone is just attracted to.
Yeah.
So I think it extends beyond, just how you feel. It extends to everyone around you. I think Joe Dispenza talks how there is this magnetic field around us, and you can expand it and you can make it. I think he uses something related to love and how when you love yourself, this field changes. But yeah, there's certainly something into that.
Absolutely. It's like those emotions like joy, gratitude, love, um, those, if you can find a ritual or some sort of way to like get into that state on a daily basis, regardless of a certain circumstance. I think like writing down things that you're grateful for every
Mhm.
day, if you can, just think of things you're grateful for, right? And that immediately changes your state, right? So a lot of my events, before people come back out of the experience and come upright and sit up, I make sure that everyone touches into something that they're grateful for before they leave the experience. And when you can really feel that, like whether it's your health, like the loved ones in your life,
Mhm.
so like something I was really grateful for today, actually, this week, was that I've created this business that I do that helps a lot of people. And I get to create my own calendar. I get to create my own schedule. Right. And I love that. That's like when I remember being in like a job where that I was just working for the money, and it was just like not fulfilling. I had to suppress my true essence every day just to fit in
Yeah.
to that workplace culture. And I didn't have control over my calendar. And it was driving me crazy because I'm like, this doesn't feel like a free life. It feels like sort of
Sure.
some form of imprisonment, really. And yeah, so I was just really feeling grateful for what I've created with SoundQuest and SoundQuest Academy, because it's allowed me to be in sort of like this ikigai. I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah,
ikigai,
yeah, yeah.
which is like,
Familiar.
doing something I love, doing something that helps other people, that the world needs, and something that I can be paid for, right? And so I'm like in this sort of ongoing flow state with it, and that keeps sort of exponentially compounding. So yeah, I was just feeling grateful for that. And then when you can touch into those things that you're grateful for, you're on that frequency now. And so you'll start to like bring more of that into your reality. So yeah, I can't recommend that enough. Just having like a gratitude practice to raise your vibration.
Agree. I used to have one. I don't know why I stopped. And I want to make just to let people know that it is not so much about the things you are grateful for, is, as you said, entering that state.
Yeah,
So
it's
for me,
about
at
getting into a state, into a frequency.
yeah, because at some point you run out of things to be grateful for, and you say, "Look, I'm grateful for my cozy socks, so I'm grateful for the podcast microphone, so I can have good." But it puts you in that positive state. And when I used to do this, I would do it first thing in the morning. So splash my face with some water, make a coffee, and sit on my bed, and then I'll close my eyes, sit in a good position. I'll be like, you know what? I'm very grateful for having a MacBook, so my podcast will upload quicker. And it sounds so silly and trivial, but I would always have a smile after I would do the practice. And my day would immediately be better because instead of starting my day with distractions and social media and news, which are always negative,
Yeah.
and oh, what will my boss will say, you start in this positive state. So it's already a win. You have a small win.
Right. And like I was saying before, you can take that state and start to be sort of like the creator of your day and life, instead of being reactive to external stimuli. You're now, at the helm, at the steering wheel of your state. And when something sort of comes up, suddenly, like say an email comes up that isn't ideal, or like, let's say someone cuts you off in traffic or something like this, you're not as reactive as you would have been, right? You have that space now, and you're in this state, and it's really hard to pull you out of that state. Um, and maybe you could have like a ripple effect on someone, right? That you
Definitely.
interact with, because I think we're all very porous beings, and we're influenced by other people around us and their emotional states, right? So if you can sort of have like an uplifting presence, perhaps you can help dissipate, negativity in other people around you.
Yeah. That's why the cliche, you are the average of the five people you surround yourself. If these five people are negative and grumpy and always look for the worst and complain, you pick up on it. No matter how positive you are, you pick up on it. So
Right.
yeah.
Or, if you're really like grooved in with like a different vibration or a different emotional state, um, those people will just naturally fall away out of your life, because you're not resonating there anymore. You're not getting
So
sucked into that vortex. You're just, I've had that experience where I've had certain people around me that were pretty negative, but because I was able to, take certain actions, like for example, for me, a big leg up in life has been removing alcohol from my life, right?
good for you.
Because I didn't even realize it because I was so in it. But now that I can see the forest from the trees, just that one decision to quit alcohol, those people that I was surrounded with just sort of naturally fell away. And I don't really have them in my reality anymore, because, I feel like I'm just like at a different vibrational frequency, a different emotional state in general. And so it's hard for me to hang out with people who aren't matching that at this point in my life.
And it's tough because alcohol is one of those drugs, and it is a drug to anyone who says it's not, that you are in a way people almost get offended when you tell them you're not going to drink. They take it personally, and one of the reasons is many people, the whole personality revolves around them drinking. So when you go on the date and you're like, I'm not going to drink, or when you go with the people, with with your friends, and you suddenly is like, I'm just going to have a Red Bull, or a soda, and people almost take it personally, like, you're not drinking. It feels like a personal attack, because they wish they had the guts to do that as well. They wish they could be comfortable enough in their own skin to go out and have, instead of having alcohol to release their inhibitions and remove the filters, they deep inside kind of wish they could do it without it. So in a way, it's tough to escape it, because the people will peer pressure you, either deliberately or not. They will peer pressure you. So that's a tough one. So good for you, man. Congrats.
Yeah, and like maybe perhaps what you're referring to is like it might be shining a light on something that they kind of subconsciously know, like, they
Yeah.
might have a problem, let's say,
Yeah.
and they don't, or they might be, they might feel like they're losing like a certain paradigm that they've been living in when suddenly someone around close to them stops that certain behavior. And then so they maybe you'll get some flack for that because it's just they're projecting onto you. But it's I don't really hear that anymore. Like I said, like those people kind of fell away after a certain point. I just wasn't interested in hanging out at bars anymore and that sort of thing. So I don't even go to those environments in the first place, really. But if I am around people that are drinking, like I can still hang out and have like normal conversations.
Yeah,
And I never
obviously, yeah.
wake up in the morning and say, "Oh man, I really wish I got drunk last night." Right?
You never,
That
yeah,
hasn't
true.
happened one time. So I think I'm on the right track.
No one ever wakes up after a night out saying, "Oh, I wish I was more hangover."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But I understand
Lovely.
over in London and the UK in general, like drinking is a huge, like going to the pub and having pints is a huge part of the culture. So I can understand how it would be a little more difficult to avoid in that area of the world for sure.
It is, and depends how strong you are as a person. Depends if you are comfortable in your solitude. I am very comfortable in my solitude. Means that after work drinks don't affect me, because I'm okay. I'm okay to go at home and be alone and do my thing. Whereas many people are almost like psychologically trapped, and they feel this obligation to join for after work drinks. But it's not that it happens once or twice. And I'm not advocating, like, I'm not saying don't drink, do whatever you want. But imagine that over the period of 3 years, you work in a corporate job, and every single day you drink. You'll have this hazy mind. You're not going to be yourself. You're just keeping yourself back from being the best version of yourself. And the relationships you create, any relationship that revolves around drugs, like the only thing you do with this person is you party and you do drugs, that's not really a relationship. That's
Uh-huh.
just someone who tags along that enables your negative behavior. Because once you stop the drugs, many of these relationships, they're going to start falling off. And I've seen that firsthand, really.
Absolutely. And people don't realize how much of a compounding effect it has, right? Like
Of course, yeah.
even just one drink or two drinks, it affects your sleep, right? Like you don't get into that deep REM sleep that you need. And
Hmm.
so you have this undercurrent of feeling like tired, maybe irritable, which then affects like your decision making. And that has a compounding effect. Like, just like you might come out sideways on someone or someone in your life or relationship. You might, I noticed people who drink and do drugs, they're kind of like not nice to each other, right? And there's a reason for that. I think it's just because people are like more irritable and lower vibration because it's like this compounding that it affects your sleep, it affects your executive functioning, it affects your decision making, it makes you feel foggy, tired, right? And so that can have a huge compounding effect, even though it might seem a little bit unnoticeable, it does have a big impact.
And to that, I want to add two things. One is that now they found out how alcohol, like cancer, is linked to alcohol, a lot of it, and how it turns out that this one glass, somehow, someone convinced us that pregnant woman having one glass of red wine is better than having no wine, which is that alcohol was still damaging the cells of the kids. And now everyone has all these problems growing up, and it's like, oh, where is it? It's the food, is this, but it's also the alcohol. And
Right.
the second is the effects to it. You can only know if you measure it. Do you know the company Whoop? Do you know Whoop, like the bracelet that measures your
Yes.
sleep?
Yeah, I've seen
Okay,
that.
so I used to have that for a year, and I was my own experiment self-study. So I would say, what if I have alcohol at 6, at 7, at 8? So I would experiment everything. Okay. So when I was sober, exercising, and reading before sleep, my average sleep would range at 88%. So that's how much I've rested. And that's a good score. Anything above 80. If I had a single beer, not a cocktail, at least at 6 p.m., and I always sleep by midnight, my sleep will never be more than 66%.
Mm.
That's one beer at 6.
Mm.
Imagine here we go out at 10 and we come back at 1. So we
Yeah.
already messing. So imagine that every single weekend or every single day.
Ugh, I can't
It just adds
anymore.
up.
I'm too old for that. My hangovers will be too severe. Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. Okay. Mike, last question. What do you want to be remembered for?
Good question. Um, just being a kind-hearted person that cared and uh, use my skills and talents and abilities to serve others best
That's
I
nice.
could while I was here. Yeah.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. My pleasure.